All right, strap yourselves in for the deep dive. We're heading straight into a pressure cooker today, March 27th, 1977.
Oh, yeah, this one's going to be intense. Tenerife in the Canary Islands. Starts out like any normal Sunday, right? And then boom, the deadliest accident in aviation history.
It's one of those events, just grabs you, and the material you sent over, wow, really puts you right there on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, it's all there in the sources. Two Boeing 747s, those massive jumbo jets colliding on a runway, and fog everywhere. You can barely see a thing. The scale of this thing, it's almost impossible to grasp.
Absolutely. Hundreds of lives lost. A chain reaction of events. Honestly, it just makes you wonder how something like this could even happen. And that's what we're doing here. This is more than just a recap. This is a deep dive. We're going to break this tragedy down piece by piece, figure out how these small decisions, one after another, led to this massive disaster. And believe it or not, it all started with a bomb threat miles away from Tenerife.
A bomb threat. That's the spark that lit the fuse on this whole thing. See, we had KLM flight 4805 coming in from Amsterdam.
Right.
And then you've got Pan Am flight 1736. They started in Los Angeles, stopped in New York, and were on their way to Gran Canaria Airport. Picture it. A beautiful Sunday flight to the sunny Canary Islands. Everything's perfect.
Until it's not.
Exactly. Suddenly, there's this explosion. A bomb goes off at the Gran Canaria terminal. Just like that, their intended destination.
Right.
It's shut down. Total chaos. And that's when things start to go sideways for these two 747s.
It's crazy how one event miles away could set off this chain reaction.
A chain reaction is exactly right, because now they've got all these incoming flights, including these two jumbos, and they're all diverted, rerouted to a smaller airport on the island, Los Rodeos Airport. Now, picture this. You're trying to cram a bunch of battleships into a tiny harbor. That's basically what happened at Los Rodeos.
And the sources really paint this picture of an airport that was totally unprepared for this.
It was a logistical nightmare, really. You've got these huge planes all over the place, parked every which way, and guess what? They ended up blocking the main taxiway. So any plane that wanted to take off...
They had to use the runway to taxi.
You got it. Imagine that. A 747 doing a U-turn on the runway. They call it a backtrack procedure. It's a risky move, even on a good day. But this was far from a good day.
Oh no, this is where the fog rolls in.
Thick fog, like something out of a horror movie. The sources really emphasize how sudden it was. 1 minute the visibility is okay. The next you can barely see your hand in front of your face. And this fog, it just blankets the entire airfield. Pilots can't see, air traffic controllers can't see. It's just chaos.
So we've got an overcrowded airport. Giant planes doing these weird maneuvers on a single runway. And now zero visibility. It's like a recipe for disaster.
It's the perfect storm, and right in the middle of it, you have these two planes and the men in the cockpits. Now, KLM flight 4805, it was a Boeing 747-206B. They called it the Rijn, that's Dutch for the Rhine. 234 passengers, 14 crew members.
And the captain?
Captain Jacob Veldhuizen van Zanten. This guy was a legend. KLM's chief flight instructor. Thousands of hours flying experience, the best of the best. He was even in KLM's ads, the face of the airline, a real icon.
So you got this incredibly experienced captain at the helm of one 747. And what about the Pan Am flight?
Pan Am flight 1736, Boeing 747-121. This plane had its own story too. It was the Clipper Victor, the first 747 ever delivered to an airline. It had even been hijacked back in 1970. 380 passengers, 16 crew.
And their captain?
Victor Grubbs, another seasoned pilot, top-notch record. So here you have it. Two incredibly experienced captains, two huge planes stuck on this one runway, and it's about to get a whole lot worse.
Yeah, there was that decision made by the KLM captain that really changed everything.
That's right. While they were grounded in Tenerife, Captain Van Zanten decided to refuel, fill her up, even though their final destination, Gran Canaria, wasn't that far. The investigation later said he was probably trying to stick to KLM's strict duty time regulations, make sure they didn't run out of time before they could fly again. But this decision, it had a huge impact.
It made them a sitting duck, right?
Exactly. They were stuck there, refueling. And the Pan Am, they were ready to go as soon as Gran Canaria reopened, but they couldn't get around the KLM and that refueling truck.
I can't even imagine trying to maneuver a 747 in that situation.
The sources mentioned they were only 12 feet apart at one point. 12 feet. These are massive planes. It was a recipe for disaster. And that refueling delay, it just added fuel to the fire, so to speak.
Okay, so here's where we are. An airport packed with planes. Fog you can cut with a knife. Two jumbo jets on the same runway. One's getting ready to take off, the other one's stuck. Talk about tension.
The tension is palpable. It's like a thriller movie. And this is where the communication breakdowns start to happen, those misunderstandings that would lead to the unthinkable.
So the KLM, they're instructed to taxi down the entire length of the runway, do a 180-degree turn at the end, and get ready for takeoff.
Right. They're doing this backtrack, and air traffic control, ATC, they're the ones on the ground guiding the planes. They ask the KLM to report when they're ready for clearance.
Clearance to take off.
Yeah. But the KLM crew, they decided to wait. They were still running through their pre-flight checklist. It seemed like a small delay, but it added to the pressure cooker.
And while this is going on, the Pan Am, they're stuck behind them,
Right.
getting their instructions from ATC.
Exactly. ATC tells them to follow the KLM down the runway and exit at the third taxiway on the left, taxiway C3. Then they can use the parallel taxiway to get to their takeoff point. Sounds simple enough, right?
Except not really,
Yep.
because you said there was fog.
Oh, yeah, thick fog. And you know what else? The taxiway exits, they were barely marked. Some reports say they weren't marked at all. Can you imagine? Trying to find your way out of a maze in the dark? That's what it was like for the Pan Am crew.
That's terrifying.
It really is. And the recordings from the Pan Am cockpit, they show how confused the pilots were. They weren't even sure if ATC had said the first or third exit. They had to ask for clarification. The third one, sir. 1, 2, 3, third one, ATC told them. And it turns out, even if they had found C3, later analysis, including a study by ALPA, the Pilots Association, suggested that turn would have been almost impossible for a 747 to make without hitting something.
Wow. So the Pan Am is crawling down this runway. They can't see anything. They've already missed their exit. And at the other end, the KLM is ready to go. This is where things really start to unravel.
It's the point of no return. The KLM first officer, he radios the tower, ready for takeoff, waiting for our ATC clearance, and the tower responds. But they used the wrong call sign. They said KLM 4805 instead of KLM 805. A small mistake, but in this situation...
It could have added to the confusion.
Absolutely. But the KLM crew, they knew it was them they were talking to, and then ATC gives them clearance to the Papa Beacon. This tells them their route after takeoff, altitude, heading, all that. But it wasn't clearance to takeoff. There's a big difference.
And that's the crucial misunderstanding, right?
Right. The KLM captain, he hears the word takeoff, and he thinks he's good to go. He says, yes. And the first officer starts reading back the clearance. And he ends with, well, the sources debate the exact wording, but it was something like, we are now at takeoff, or maybe we are taking off. But before he can even finish, the captain cuts him off.
We're going.
Those are the words. We're going. He releases the brakes and they start rolling down the runway.
At this point, it's like a slow-motion train wreck, isn't it? You know what's going to happen, but you can't stop it.
You got it. And the tower controller, he realizes what's happening. He immediately says, okay, stand by for takeoff. I will call you. But this crucial message, it's drowned out. Other transmissions are happening at the same time. And in the KLM cockpit, all they hear is this high-pitched squeal, a heterodyne. They never hear the stand by for takeoff part.
So the KLM is rolling. The tower's trying to tell them to stop. And the Pan Am...
They know something's wrong. They hear the KLM's transmission. And the Pan Am captain, he gets on the radio. He says, and we're still taxiing down the runway, the Clipper 1736. But his transmission, it's lost, too. All that interference. The KLM never hears it.
Two critical pieces of communication. Both lost. It's hard to believe. But even inside the KLM cockpit, someone tried to speak up, didn't they?
The flight engineer, he was sitting behind the captain and the first officer, and he asks in Dutch, is he not clear then, that Pan American? But the captain, he's so sure of himself, he says, oh yes, and they just keep going.
Unbelievable. And then it happens.
Yeah. The Pan Am captain, he sees them first. The KLM's landing lights, coming right at them out of the fog. You can hear him on the cockpit recording. There he is, look at him, goddamn, that son of a bitch is coming, and the first officer yells, get off, get off, get off. The captain, he guns the engines and tries to swerve left onto the grass.
The last-ditch effort.
The last-ditch effort. But it was too late. The KLM, they'd already hit V1. That's the speed where you have to commit to takeoff, even if there's a problem. Their only chance was to try and get airborne. So they pull back on the controls. But it's too early. The tail of the plane hits the runway, hard. They scrape along the asphalt, sparks flying. They almost clear the Pan Am. Almost. But the KLM's left engines, the bottom part of the plane, the landing gear, it all slams into the Pan Am's right side.
Rips right through the upper deck. The descriptions in the sources are just horrifying.
It was a massacre. The KLM, it gets briefly airborne, but it's badly damaged. It stalls, rolls over, and crashes back onto the runway. Slides another 1,000 feet, and then the fuel, all that fuel they took on in Tenerife, it ignites. A massive fireball. Both planes are engulfed.
An inferno. It's just
Yeah.
unimaginable. And the loss of life.
Everyone on the KLM. 248 people. Gone. On the Pan Am, 335 out of 396. Most of them died in the fire. Only 61 survived. They were mostly in the front section of the plane, which was more or less intact after the impact. But the fire, that fuel from the KLM, it made it so much worse.
A true nightmare. And in the aftermath, the investigations, they had to try and make sense of it all.
The Spanish authorities, they led the investigation. And their final report, it blamed the KLM captain. His decision to take off without clearance. They said he was probably trying to stick to those duty time rules, and he was worried about the fog getting worse.
But they also said there were other factors involved, right? It wasn't just him.
Right. They said the fog was a huge problem, and then there was the radio interference. Crucial communications got garbled or blocked completely. Plus, the language used by both the KLM and the tower, it was ambiguous. That we are now at takeoff from the first officer. And then the tower saying, okay, it wasn't clear.
And the Pan Am having trouble finding their exit.
Right. That didn't help either. And just the overall chaos at the airport, it was a recipe for disaster. The Dutch investigators, though, they had a slightly different take.
Oh, yeah. What did they say?
They still said the KLM captain's takeoff was the main problem, but they focused more on the communication breakdowns. They said relying on radio alone in such a high-pressure situation was just asking for trouble. Plus, they pointed out the Pan Am had actually gone past their exit, which made things even more confusing.
So different perspectives.
Yeah.
But in the end, KLM took responsibility.
Yeah. They said their crew was ultimately responsible, and they paid compensation to all the victims' families. No matter which plane they were on, it was a huge admission.
This disaster, as horrible as it was, it had a lasting impact. The aviation industry had to make changes.
Big changes. They standardized the language used in radio communication. Now, takeoff means only one thing. You're cleared to take off. No more ambiguity. And they made it mandatory to read back important instructions, so everyone's on the same page. They even started using the word departure until that final takeoff clearance is given.
Those seem like such basic things now. Hard to believe they weren't always in place.
It took this tragedy to make those changes happen, and there's another big change that came out of this. Cockpit Resource Management, CRM.
CRM. I've heard of that.
It's all about teamwork in the cockpit. It encourages everyone, no matter their rank, to speak up if they see a problem, even if it means questioning the captain. And captains, they're trained to listen to their crew. No more my way or the highway. It's about working together to stay safe.
And the airports themselves, they had to adapt too, right?
Yes.
Especially Tenerife's.
Absolutely. Tenerife got a whole new airport. Tenerife South, bigger, more modern, opened in 1978. And Los Rodeos, they renamed it Tenerife North. They put in ground radar so they could track planes even in thick fog.
It's amazing how this one event led to so many changes. And of course, we can't forget the human cost.
Right. There are memorials in both the Netherlands and the U.S. to remember the victims. Those memorials, they stand as a reminder of what happened that day and how important it is to keep flying safe.
The Tenerife airport disaster. It's a story about a chain reaction, a bomb threat, a diversion, a refueling decision, miscommunication, human error. And the result was the deadliest accident in aviation history. It's a stark reminder that even the smallest decisions can have huge consequences, and it shows how important clear communication is when the stakes are so high.
It's true. What happened in Tenerife, it's more than just an aviation story. It's a lesson for